Good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to this live feed on Love is Not Enough. So the reason why I'm doing this particular live feed this evening is because someone requested it. Someone sent me a note and asked to speak to, is love enough in a relationship, and can an intimate relationship be successful, or can an intimate relationship thrive and flourish based on love? So I gave that a lot of thought and a lot of feeling as well. And you know, for the ages, we have been as a people have been attempting to explain what love is, have been attempting to define love, to understand love, to connect to what love is, and to bring it wholly and fully into our lives for so long, for thousands of years. Some of the most famous philosophers, poets, minds, hearts of this world, of this earth, have, and probably beyond, have attempted to really define what love is. So I thought and felt it right to really, Happy New Year, Catherine, hoping you're very, very well. Thank you. Hello, Noah, how are you? Nikki, hello, welcome. Let me know that you're here, beautiful people. Place a number 1 in the comment box so I know that you're here, and we can interact. Today is going to be a really deep dive into love, and is love enough, and conscious relating, and we'll actually even look at Ioana, hello, how are you? Happy New Year. From New Zealand, so beautiful, so beautiful. I'm glad you're there and you've made it there safely and enjoying yourself, I hope. So yeah, deep dive into what love is and into what relationships are. Karen, hello. Mark, hello. I can see some of you that are coming on, but number 1 in the comment box, and maybe an emoticon to let me know how you're feeling, so I can see who's coming on exactly. Yeah. So I thought it would be really, really cool to define love, or at least attempt to define love, to attempt to define the undefinable, which, you know, I've spoken to in previous live feeds before. And you know, hello, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody, by the way. I hope that everybody's made a very safe transition into 2018, and I'm very excited about the next phase of your life, and the next phase of your existence, and where you're going, and how you're feeling. Steve, hello. Hello to everybody who's coming on. So is love enough? And the title says love is not enough. So clearly a big part of me at least thinks that that love is not enough. So what does that mean though? What does that mean for relationships? What does that mean for us connecting as people? What does it mean for us understanding ourselves, and obviously knowing ourselves and knowing our partners, and what does that all mean just for really love, and how we move through the world? And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at potentially not defining love, because I don't think that, and I don't think it's necessarily something that can be defined. It's that cut and dry, but we're going to really explore love. And I've taken a sort of a leaf out of the book of the Greeks in this, but also a few other different cultures and languages as well, because there's so many beautiful definitions of love under different circumstances, and experiencing love in different circumstances, and what that means. And it's really it's so beautiful when you start getting into these definitions, or these feeling states of what love can do for us, and how it can make us feel emotively, and how we then act in accordance with those feelings. So we're going to explore that. We're going to explore that quite openly. But what happens generally is that we idealize love. And in idealizing love, we overestimate love. And as a price that we pay for that, our relationships can suffer. So our intimate romantic relationships in particular can suffer. And even our relationship to ourselves, and our relationship to things, to ideas that, or values or beliefs that we once held really true, can suffer. And the problem with idealizing or over-idealizing love is that it causes us to develop unrealistic expectations about what love actually is, and what it can actually do for us. Therefore, when we're stuck in that sort of cycle, that perpetual cycle of expectation, we become rigid in our ways, and we become locked down in love, not so much love, but life having to be a particular way. And these unrealistic expectations, they keep us constricted and restricted, and they ground us in fear, because what happens is we become so locked in and so focused on love or life or relationships having to be a particular way that there's no scope for change, there's no scope for difference, there's no scope for variance. And we all know that life is full of variety. Life does not always go 100% accurately to the way that we envision it. So these unrealistic expectations, they sabotage the very relationships that we hold so dear to us. And we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this a little bit later, and what this actually means for us, and how it affects us. Hey Michelle, how are you? Oh, Melanie, love Melanie. Hope you've had a beautiful day as well. Mark, yes, preconceived expectations, they can really be destructive for the way that we move through the world, and obviously the relationships that we hold dear to ourselves. Yeah. So let us jump into defining love, or at least not so much defining love, but just understanding the different terms that various cultures throughout the ages, historically and in modern times, have for understanding love, and how language is really deeply important, how the words that we use can affect the way we behave, the way we feel, the way we think, and what's happening neurochemically in us as well, what's happening in our brains, and then how our brains can actually affect the way we relationship. So it's super important to begin to understand this. Yeah. So we want to understand what is. Let's start with romantic love. Let's start with erotic love, romantic love, erotic love. So the Greeks would call this eros, or erotic love. Yeah, and we're going to in a moment soon. We're going to go into the 7 definitions of love that the Greeks had, and the 7 words for love that the Greeks held, and how they would really use these words specifically to that situation. And we'll understand the power in doing that as well. And we'll speak to the terms that we use, like I love you and I love chocolate, or I love you and I love my car, and what that actually does to us, and internally what it does to our models of reality and the way we view the world. It's really quite interesting how that can affect us. Yeah. So we'll look deep into that as well. But essentially, love initially is involuntary. So it's a deep chemical reaction that takes place, or how we define love in that instance, that takes place within us. And brain science, basically neuroscience, tells us that it's a drive, like it's a biological drive within us, like this. It's a craving for a specific person, and it's normal and it's natural to sort of lose control in that space. You often hear the term falling in love, and the connotation of falling in love means you're out of control, you're falling, you don't have control of your being, especially in the early stages of romance, so romantic love. Yeah. And like thirst, for example, love can make us do strange and different things that are out of context to our normal behavior. Yeah. But as always, knowledge is authentic power, especially if it's used with sincerity and an open intent. And if we have wisdom and knowledge around this, we can navigate our way through life and through love a little bit differently. So it's almost like romantic love is almost like a natural addiction, and treating it in this way to some extent excuse me, can actually help you navigate through the nuances and the difficulty of the initial stages of relationship or relating in romantic life. And essentially neuroscience would tell us that anthropology would even tell us that we're built to fall in love. We're made to fall in love, and the Greeks would call this the madness of the gods. Which I find interesting. And remember, there's when we're talking about myth and we're talking about mythology and storytelling and so forth, Jose, how are you, brother? We're talking to what it represents in a particular epoch, a particular time and space, and culture and society, but also how that message can translate symbolically, because the oldest way of learning is through symbolism for us, yeah, as human beings. And to learn in that way can be a tremendous gift to our own growth and evolution. So understanding the symbolism behind the mythology of the stories that we're telling. Excuse me. And modern psychologists may define love as the strong emotional desire, a strong desire for emotional union with another person. But what is love? Like, so we this is the thing. Like we just have to keep asking the question, because eventually we're going to immerse in it, embody it, and become it, and we will feel what it is. But it means so many different things to so many different people. And this is what I was speaking to earlier as well. Like, you know, it can, for example, you know, a songwriter may say, whenever you're close, whenever you're near, I hear a symphony. So it's that mythology, that symbolism is different. As Shakespeare said, love is blind and love cannot see. So it's, you know, Aristotle said love is comprised of a single soul inhabiting two bodies. So almost talking about that twin flame experience, that soulmate experience, or probably more of a twin flame experience if anyone's into twin flame or soulmate research, or into that spiritualist arena. But I'd love to hear also how some of you may define love. What does love mean to you? How would you define love? How have you experienced love, romantic love? Let's keep this really simple and just to say, how have you experienced romantic love in your life, and what has that meant for you? How have you negotiated romantic love? How have you related to romantic love? How is romantic love related to you as well? So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and some of your feelings there too. That would be great. But when we're looking at, and I want to speak to the physiology first. When we're looking at the brain and how we've evolved neurologically for mating and reproduction, there's three basic reasons, or basic systems, love systems, brain love systems, something along those lines. And the first is the sex drive, or the lust, the craving for sexual gratification. So in that first stage of relating, or that first stage of love, or that first stage of relationship, what happens is the body releases a heap of neurotransmitters and hormones. And we've evolved this way to enable us to seek a range of potential mating partners. So we can have sex with someone that we aren't in love with, that we don't have that deep emotional connection with, or that history with. We haven't spent copious amounts of time with them, but we can still procreate. So let me just get really clear. I'm explaining this from a neuroscience perspective to begin with. I'm going to go a lot deeper than that. Not that neuroscience isn't deep; it's very deep. But we're going to, we're going to go broader, very broad, and expand on that as well. Yeah. So you can effectively feel a sex, the sex drive that you have through lust, and it's not necessarily focused on a particular individual. And you know, we've all, I'm sure, on many levels, we've all felt that to some degree before. That we've felt lust where we haven't had a historical, deep emotional connection with someone. We've felt that physical drive to be near someone, to mate, to procreate, to connect physically in that way. And that becomes deeply powerful as well from a perspective of ensuring that we're able to connect to a mate as a starting point. Then we've got so romantic love, or attraction, essentially. So it's the attraction phase, and this is the craving, the obsessive thinking of a particular person, and this has potentially evolved to enable us to focus on that mating energy on just one individual at a time. And the reason why that would happen is to, again, ensure procreation. We then move to attachment, and that's the feeling of a deeper union with a long-term partner. And this is potentially evolved to, and I say potentially very purposely, because, you know, whilst we know a lot about stuff, there's a lot we don't know about stuff meaning life, the way we connect, the way we behave, the way we feel, the way we are in union with each other, the way we communicate. There's the way the brain functions, the way the cosmos functions. There's just so much we know, so much we don't know at the same time. So at least this attachment has formed at least long enough to rear a single child through infancy together as a team to ensure the safety and the health of that child. And although in this day and age, for cultural reasons, for many different reasons actually, many of us still actually remain together much longer, and we enjoy the multiple benefits of being with a partner long term, even when there is no goal to have children. Now, this becomes really interesting, and we are able to, it's interesting that babies are actually really born prematurely, and I won't get too much of this because I'll get into a tangent, but when babies are born, and the reason I understand is because from the ages of 0 months to 3 months and then 3 months to 12 months, the brain development is so profound. Like it amplifies ridiculously, exponentially grows. Now, what's interesting is that, babies, human babies, are like some of the only babies in the animal kingdom that would basically die like immediately without care and attention, which is really interesting. So when we're talking about the attachment side of things, or the attachment in falling in deep union with a long-term partner, it's necessary to enhance the safety and the health of that child. So essentially satisfying evolutionary and biological needs for procreation and the survival, the extension of the human race. So these three brain systems and feelings essentially interact with us and with the people in our lives in many ways to create a myriad of ways in which we relate and in ways in which we would love. And attraction is really important. And attraction can be known in different ways, and it can be called romantic love, obsessive love, passionate love, infatuation, and everyone is affected by this generally at some point in their life. And some people will just continually be affected by this, or until some people can learn to not be so affected by it and understand the role that it plays. And the intensity, so this is the first stage of love, the first stage of relating. And generally, we can call this the honeymoon period as well. Again, that deep connection to hormones being released, very specific neurochemicals being released in the body to ensure that we become attracted and connected to that person. But what this also does is it polarizes our view of that relationship, of ourselves in that relationship, and the person as well. The person that we're attracted to, per se, yeah? So the intensity of this will generally last anywhere from 6 to 3 years before it turns into attachment. But during that attachment phase as well, we have to understand that it can be, that can also be intense in a very different way. We begin to, the hormones begin to level out, and the wholeness of who we are begins to come out. And that's where, when we're talking about relationships, and I won't get into this right now because I've done that in other videos, in other live feeds, and you can find that in YouTube channel. So I think it's the 3 stages of love, or the 3 stages of relating. You'd be able to find that on YouTube. And that goes into what happens in that second stage, in that attachment phase, and how we behave and interact and what our opportunities and potentials are. But basically, in this romantic stage, we have an opportunity to not so much bypass that. I don't know if that's, I'm still trying to figure that out. I don't know if that's necessary, but at least to connect to it, understand it in a different way. Excuse me, I'm just going to put the fan on. It's a little bit warm. I hope that that you can still hear me and it doesn't, the noise, it doesn't affect the sound. Let me know if the sound is affected. I've just put the fan on because it's, hi Lana, Happy New Year, because it's quite warm where I am. Yeah, so let me know if the sound is still good, yeah? So, I mean, the behavioral traits of early stage romantic love vary, and, we experience extremity in our behavior and extremity in who we are, like loss of appetite, mood swings, separation anxiety, craving, intenser motivation for emotional union, possessiveness, intrusive thinking in our own mind. Like it can become like super intense, like super intense. Yeah. Yes, that it can be bypassed. Yes. I said that purposely, and I was thinking of you when I said that, and the benefits of bypassing as well. And I'm still on the fence with that, whether it's something to be bypassed or something to be mastered. And I feel they're two different things, but that's potentially a conversation another time. Michelle says, romantic love for me is the experience of sharing romance, romantic experiences, physical intimacy, and a partnership approach to life with a chosen person, which I share only with that person. For me, love just is. Love all beings the same. It's not about love. It's the level of commitment and type of connection I choose with another that adds color, depth, meaning, and growth beyond any other relationship. Yeah, beautiful, Michelle. Thank you. And we'll go into some of those other attributes as well that really form that sacredness in union and in partnership and in connection as well with people. With people that we choose to spend our time with people that we choose to share ourselves with. Yeah, that's a really beautiful part of that. So, you know, it's said that love is the most powerful emotion a human being can experience. And I would say, yeah, absolutely, probably alongside fear as well. Fear is a really intense emotion that we can experience, like super powerful. Do we know what love is, though? Do we really know what love is, and the way that we use love and how it actually affects us? And why at times can it be so difficult to find love? And we can connect more to that if we understand and we know what the word love is, and it's not the same as one's feeling of love as well. So the point of this particular aspect of the discussion is to help us understand that love, the word love rather, can be abused for the expression of a different sets of feelings. So when I say abuse, I probably shouldn't say abuse, but it can be used and misused for the expression of different sets of feelings that we are actually experiencing. And I mentioned this earlier, like it can be used as an expression of affection, but like I love you, like you say to someone, I love you, but it also can be used as an expression of pleasure, like I love my car, I love riding in my car, or I love riding my motorbike, or I love going down to the beach. And to make it more complicated, you know, we use the word love. It also expresses human virtues based on compassion, on affection, kindness, sincerity. So it's a state of being that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with something or someone outside of us. And this potentially is the purest form of love. So again, you know, I'm very, very mindful of the words that I'm, okay, Jada, so the mastery is the bypassing. Interesting. Okay. Which makes sense because there's mastery over the physiological self. And there's a direction of where the physiology is going internally, and how the brain, I suppose, is operating and directing attention, as opposed to just allowing everything to run a course. Interesting, very interesting. But let's talk about the seven words that the Greeks used to define different states of love. So storge, natural affection, the love that you share with your family, eros, sexual and erotic desire. So that can be erotic desire and kind of love, and that can be positive or negative. Agape, which is the unconditional love or divine love. Ludus, which is like a playful love, call it like a flirtation or a childlike love, yeah. Pragma, which also is the root word, pragmatism finds its etymological meaning in pragma, which is like a long-standing love, like for example, the love in a long-term relationship or a married couple. And philialtia, I should know that, I'm Greek, but this is ancient Greek, so I don't know. I can't speak ancient Greek, but that's the love of self, basically. Again, there would be negative and positive polarity praise to this too. So these are 7 different kinds of feelings that the Greeks would have, expressive states the Greeks would have for those feeling states. So the love that you feel for your partner is not the love that you feel for your mother. But now, obviously, when we say, Mum, I love you, Dad, I love you, it's different. The intention would, for the vast majority of us, would be very different to when we say that to our partner or even to our child or to a friend. The intention is different, but the words are the same. The tonality might be different as well. The gaze, the posturing, the body language would be different, but the words are the same. And even love that we have for our partners and even the love that we have for our friends and our parents, that changes to some degree over time. And you'll feel different emotions for different situations and people, but we still use the same word. So this is where the confusion is made when we're communicating. And you can say I love you to 2 different people and mean it, but you're feeling differently. That's the thing, you're feeling differently. It's our brain does not get that. We're saying the same words. Sit with that for a bit. That's interesting. And I'm still sitting with it as well. So this is not, we're not solving any great mysteries here this evening, or I don't think we are anyway. These are mysteries that have been trying to be solved for thousands and thousands of years. So we'll talk to it, we'll open it up, but we'll see how it goes. But what you and we speak to right brain, left brain hemispheres, but there's a bit of a fallacy around that as well. The right brain may be dominant in controlling, or rather being responsible for certain actions or expressions or states of being, and the left side would be responsible for others. But both right and both right and left hemispheres interact and integrate, and they communicate with each other. So when one is maybe dominant in its action or in its expression, the other side would be supporting that side as well and still be firing, just in different ways. So I just wanted to be really clear about that as well. And we're sort of discovering this more and more in neuroscience at the moment, yeah? So generally, the right side of the brain becomes more responsible for the feeling, yeah? But again, the left side is still active in interpreting, in supporting, in understanding, in connecting, in allowing those neurons to fire as well in that right side of the brain. The left side of the brain is controlled more by language per se. So if you use the word love 10 times in a day in different situations, it can lose its power. So your left part of the brain does not get fully activated when you really mean I love you and want to get excited about it. So 50% of the brain is, technically speaking, is quite a lot, yeah? So we need to learn the differences between the 7 states just at a base level. And we'll talk a little bit more about some other definitions of love in different languages and cultures. It's really beautiful too. But how they feel. So it's not so much learning the states of love like the words, but how they feel. Because it's easy to recognize the words. That's just basic. And awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of this is like the base. This is the foundation for beginning to experience love in different ways, in more authentic ways. And it's something that we practice. So love is something that we practice for the rest of our lives. It's not something that we master once and then that's it, it's done. And we want to be very deeply sincere when we're using the word love, and potentially using other words when we're not addressing emotion towards other people. But if we are using the word love for inanimate objects, for example, or experiences, it's being really mindful of that as well. But an example of what I mean then, instead of saying I love chocolate, you would say I enjoy chocolate, or instead of saying I love my job, you may say I have a deep passion for what I do, or I'm deeply inspired by what I do. And I remember having this conversation years ago with a friend of mine, like 10 years ago. And she would say to me, her and her husband, this is really interesting, her and her husband. And she would say, because I'd say to my friend Dan, man, I love you, brother. You're the best, you know. And she said, you shouldn't say that so much. But I said, I do love him though. She said, yeah, but don't say it. But obviously, it's a person, so it's more than okay to say. And you can say, I love my computer, or I love my dog, or I love my car. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just understanding the words that we're using. But the point I'm making with that story that I was just speaking to was that what she was referring to, what Elle was referring to was, don't overuse that word. Like, be really mindful. It's a sacred word. There's a specialness to it. And I sort of get that now. Like, I get that more and more as I'm sort of just growing up, as I'm, years go on, as I have very particular life experiences. So Michelle asks, is this feeling the energy behind the love you're expressing? Is this the different energy in which that love is expressed? I believe so, Michelle. Yeah. I think feeling that energy is so important. I mean, it's something that I'm learning, that I'm mastering. I feel that, we're all on a journey. So we all evolve in different stages and levels. And as we grow and we feel and we pay greater attention to ourselves, we really move into different states of understanding or connecting to ourselves and who we are. And that's really beautiful as well. For example, back to those words again, enjoying, loving, and passion are three different emotions, essentially. That inspired state of being, or that gratitude even, is the different emotions. They're somewhat interconnected, absolutely, but they're different emotions. It's essential for us to learn the true meaning of words and not just communicate to someone, but to also learn to experience them, to experience that person, to experience ourselves, to experience the words. Words are really powerful instruments. And a dear friend of mine said this to me a few months ago. We're having this conversation, and I absolutely agreed with her. We're talking about intention, and we're talking about words. And I sort of said, is potentially intention more important than words? And she said, I don't know about that. It's, the words carry a very strong vibration. And I said, doesn't the intention allow the vibration to, or doesn't the intention allow the word sort of change the words, of the vibratory nature of the words? And the answer is, I suppose, potentially yes, but words still carry power because we have associated preconceived meanings of those words. So it's so important to understand when we're communicating with ourselves, with others, that we create awareness around the reality of words that we're using. So important. So if we use words wisely, effectively, we can really recognize and describe deeply the kind of love that we're feeling, and enjoy the different kinds of love with different people. The next phase to this, and let me know, can everybody Jada, perfect. The limits of my language are the limits of my world. So it's so important to increase our vocabulary and understand who we are as people as well. Not for the sake of intellect. It's not for that. It's to connect the verbiage to the feeling, and connect the feeling to the words spoken and felt, like really embodiment, like deep embodiment. That's the power here. Like, it's the embodiment. So if you can relate to the embodiment of this, place number 2 in the comment box. It's the embodiment that we're really after. Corey, how are you, brother? No problem. You're here. That's great. Thank you for being here. So embodiment. That's really the power here, is the embodiment. So words essentially are agreements to express the ideas or the feelings that we have within us. And the meanings of words is not absolute. It's like I said earlier, it's a personal interpretation, because we have a preconceived idea of what words mean to us in certain contexts. So the group of feelings that can be associated with the word love, it can be very difficult to understand and even more difficult to express to another person. So it's impossible effectively just with one word. So if we can increase our range, that can be really quite powerful for us. So, there's so many beautiful words that exist in many different languages. Yuan Fen in Chinese is like a love, I don't know if it's Mandarin or Cantonese, a love relationship that has been established by a lot in life, so based on principles of Chinese culture. And I really love that definition. There's another one in the Yang language, and I can't remember how to pronounce it. It starts with M. Sorry, I'm not going to get it, but I do remember the definition, and like there's a gaze that is shared between two people who want to initiate something but neither start, and they'll initiate an intimacy or a closeness, but neither of them actually start. I like that. That's really cool. There's a word in French as well, and again I can't remember. This word starts with R or P, but it's the happiness of seeing someone again after a very long time, the connection that you feel, what you feel inside. There's another French one, la douleur exquisite, something like that. So the enormous, the deep pain that you feel in your heart when you desire someone that you cannot have. So you know these are words describing various feelings or offshoots of something that is grounded in the substance of love. There's one in Arabic as well where that you have this hope earlier than the other, so you don't have to live without the other. Like, how specific is that? That is so beautiful to have that. The Nordic language has a word, forelest or forestekt or something like that, where it's the actual euphoria that you feel when you fall in love for the first time. And I think these words are really, really beautiful. It's phenomenal the way that we can relate to these words and the power of these words and how they can influence and impact our being so deeply. Diana, yeah, really, it is a powerful topic for so many of us. Especially me, I sort of learn for these. It's not so much learning; it's learning through experience. But it's also putting context to what I'm experiencing and what we experience as a species. And the Portuguese have a beautiful word, saudade, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but the feeling of longing for someone that is far away. And it's just beautiful words. I often say that whilst the English language definitely is beautiful, there's it runs a deficit in so many different ways. Now, these moments are important in not only other cultures that express these different definitions or offshoots of love, variances of love, but also they're important for our culture because we begin to understand there's so much more than just one word to define love. And we can live love in so many different ways. Ultimately, love is an emotion in action. We get from love what we put into love, and we can literally learn and feel how to cultivate love within ourselves. And we do that by learning the different situations of love and learning the different stages of love that we're feeling or experiencing, learning how to recognize them within ourselves and feeling them, and then being able to share them with others as well. Ultimately, love of any form can only begin if the interaction is based on some form of truth, transparency, trust, reverence, respect. Even if it's just purely physical, there needs to be a trust there that interaction is going to play out in a safe way, per se. And this is essential to the growth and the mutual love that two individuals will share. If the other person is able to give you what you need and you give them what they need, you're able to grow together. And the only way to do that is through communication, ultimately, through various forms of communication. So I'll speak to why love is not just enough for relationships to flourish and to be full of vitality, to work and to function long term. It's fairly easy to fall in love with someone. It's easy to have that neurochemical dump. It's easy for us to be very, very quickly persuaded by our biology because what essentially we're after is that mateship. And it's a deeply evolutionary process that takes place. It is more difficult to remain in love. It's more difficult to stay in that space because staying in that space means we need to do the work. Staying in that space means we need to get into our shadow stuff. We need to look at our triggers, our emotional triggers. We need to look at who we are as people. And I'll go into that in a minute. We need to look at our history as well. But it's difficult to stay in love because of all those areas, because it's not just, there's so much that happens in life that we need to pay attention to what's happening within ourselves and what's happening in our external environment as well. If you essentially want to discover, connect to, feel into, the love of your life, it's so important to just be aware of the way that we use the word love, be aware of the way we relate to the word love, the way we feel about love within ourselves. I may be asking the question, am I experiencing love right now? Am I experiencing deep love right now in this moment? That could be a very powerful question to ask. And sitting with that, again, the embodiment of that, the feeling of that, that's where the power is going to come from. The power, when I say power, the authentic power for you to assume mastery of self, to be connected to self. And this is something that I personally, I really love this. I love exploring this topic again, feeling it, being with what love means, and also the embodiment. That's the embodiment of love, but also speaking to this and really connecting to how people feel and what they experience as well, and how that experience affects their model of reality or their models of reality and how they move through the world. It's really a beautiful topic to discuss. It's a beautiful state to discuss. It's what drives our existence. It's what bonds us. It's what so many of us live for in so many different ways, is to experience love in the various facets and layers and expressions that love presents itself. And Diana says, yes, completely agree. Easy to fall in love and need to be super conscious around continuing to do the self-work and the relational work to keep the connection alive and choosing the frequency of love versus the fleeting emotion. Yeah, absolutely, Diana, thank you. And we're going to speak to that as well now. So, I wanted to mention the conscious relating model and my conscious relating model and the program. There's 12 principles in that conscious relating model, and I'll speak to a few of them now. And I'll speak to how a few of those principles lead into forming what ultimately is agape, or ultimately is also eros, and ultimately what is philia as well, because these principles or these practices, these embodiment practices, allow us to really connect to the fullness of love and the depth of love. So one, of course, is, well, not of course, but one is explored sexuality. So that exploring our own sexuality, and all of this really is, I should actually start with self-gnosis. So the foundation for all of this is knowing self, knowing the various layers and expressions of self, understanding self, connecting to self, feeling self, being with self, allowing self to be open enough, as my beautiful mentor says, open enough to receive I'm paraphrasing here, to receive life, to receive the vibrancy of life, to receive the love that life gives us. And it's only, she's been not pounding this idea in me for months, but has been discussing this with me. And it's not until recently, like the last couple of weeks, that I've really just embodied, I feel I have anyway, embodied what true earnest receiving is, and the beauty in that, like the beauty in deep receiving. I love that, and what that actually does for us and what that can do for us. So knowing self is so important. And if we don't know self, ultimately, we don't know at least aspects of self and how we would respond and react and be and behave in certain situations, how do we actually show up then in relationship, and how do we love? How do we express love to others? We're almost coming from a disjointed place. We're coming from a disconnected place. So we're going to express love in some form of disconnection as well. And we're not going to be mindful of the other. So explored sexuality is another principle where we're really understanding ourselves, where we're looking at any sexual trauma that we've experienced as young people. We're also looking at our sexual fantasies as well, or what our sexual prerogative is, what our sexual yearnings are, and exploring them in some capacity, whether it be intellectually, cognitively, viscerally, but being very honest and open about that and what that means, and then bringing that to an intimate relationship and knowing self in that space as well is so important. To sexuality and physical connection is part of sacred union. Is it the be all and end all? Not at all. None of this is the be all and end all. It's all about the various aspects and expressions that come together to form either love or sacred union or long-term relating, sustainable, deep intimacy and connection. And even intimacy in and of itself, like varied intimacy. Like there's a minimum of 11 or 12 different types of intimacy that we share with our partners, with ourselves, with others. So there's so much here. Effort. Love is not enough. Like without effort, like what are we without effort? Like if we don't put effort in to life, what are we? How can we possibly flourish in life if we don't put effort in? Like, you know, if you have a completed university degree, as an example, like if you don't put effort into that degree at some level, how will you complete the degree? If you're raising children, if you don't put effort into paying attention to your children, how will they grow up? Will they grow up in health, or will they grow up in an unhealthy environment? You know, we have to put effort. If we want to get out of bed, we have to make an effort to get out of bed. If we want to go and walk to the bathroom, we need to make an effort to walk to the bathroom. Now, effort's on a spectrum. It can be really, really low effort, or it can be super, super high effort, like super intense effort. But effort needs to exist, and we forget that. Like we forget that. We sometimes think we have this polarized view of the world. This is because we haven't gone deep into our own shadow self, where we expect that life should be a breeze and easy and seamless. And yes, life should flow. There should be essence to life. Absolutely. There should be a seamlessness to life, a beautiful flow, and there shouldn't be extremes amount of pressure and resistance and friction in life. Because that's telling us that's a pattern. If that pattern's reoccurring often, it's telling us something about what we're doing in life. But we're going to face difficulty. We're going to face challenge. You know, how we move through that challenge through effort is going to be so important for us. You know, fun, play, magic, that's another principle of the conscious relating model. Like, we have to have fun in life. Whatever your definition of fun is, we have to play in life. Like, and that creates magic in our experiences, in our relationships, in our relating, the way we relate and connect. Like, it's beautiful. Like, fun allows us to immerse in an open state of being. It begins to soften and not deactivate, but deactivate the amygdala and the brainstem. So we're ceasing to release so many stress hormones through the body, such as adrenaline and cortisol. And we begin to allow ourselves to be more open to the richness of experiences that are coming into our lives, which allows us to be grateful, which of course releases GABA through the hippocampus and through the body, and we begin to relax a lot more. So we become more open. We're able to see our vantage points vary. So there's this beautiful, this dance between the physiological and the psychological and the emotional that take place when we allow ourselves to have fun in relationship. Now, yes, that's connected to love. Yes, that leads to love. Yes, that uplifts love. Yes, love is inclusive of that. But the point I'm making there is that love is so much more than just one word as well, or just one state. It is so multi-dimensional and multifaceted, and it includes so much of who we are. And that's what's really, really important. Like, that's super, super important, yeah? Looking at trust. Like, in order for love to occur, we have to have trust. In order to cultivate trust, we need to be consistent in our behaviors, in our actions, in our feeling states, in our expressions. We need to be safe. We need to be familiar. Another principle, authentic vulnerability. Learning to be vulnerable. Opening yourself up when we don't necessarily want to, because we have our own personal fears attached to that. But knowing that the other person is safe to do so enhances, deepens the connection, which ultimately deepens the experience and the feeling of love. and the attachments that we feel, the healthy attachments, hopefully. History is another principle. Learning about each other deeply, learning about the history of each other, our greatest fears, our greatest joys, our dreams. How did we grow up? What were our favorite things growing up? What were our favorite experiences growing up? Did we experience any trauma? Who were our best friends? What were our relationship like with our parents, our school? There's so much. Know the history of that person that you're with, that you're intimate with, to really allow yourself to flourish and for you to connect to that feeling of love, you know, whichever context you're expressing it in. Respecting each other's boundaries is also very important in intimate relationship, in connecting with people. Experiencing honesty, expressing honesty, learning to compromise, not compromising your values to the point where you maximize others and minimize yourself at your expense. That's dangerous. That's not healthy. That type of compromise is not healthy. But learning to be like compromise and sacrifice, learning to be selfish when you need to in a healthy way, in a considerate way, and learning to be selfless when you need to, learning to read that play. That's a huge thing in relationships. Like, so many of us get that wrong. I mean, I know I've got it wrong in so many times in my life where I've been hyper selfish at certain points in my life, or in that relationship, in certain situations where I really could have, in retrospect, I don't want to use the word should have, but could have really been more selfless and given more in that space. And by giving, I would have experienced so much more. Nova says, what is your view on attachment theory, anxious versus avoidance and security? Yeah, I mean, it's a theory. Yes, I rate it. I believe it has value in the way we grow up. I know that there are some psychologists or theorists, behaviorists, scientists, etc., that don't necessarily abide by it for a variety of reasons. I think there's value in attachment theory, and I think it can help tremendously for helping us understand how we relate to ourselves and to intimate relationships in our adulthood as well, and how the ego self plays a role in that. And through mending, healing, and understanding our relationship with our primary caregivers, we can actually equilibrate our intimate, romantic, and intimate and erotic relationships in our adulthood as well. So, yeah, I rate it. Yeah, definitely. Diana, yes. So I have a degree in psychology. Yeah, so psychology and philosophy is one of my degrees. I'm not a licensed therapist per se. I'm not a psychologist per se, but I have a background. Yes, I have a background in psychology. Yeah, and you know that formed my understanding. But to be honest, it's been many years since I've done that degree. Like it's more really what I observe and what I've experienced in my own life, and what I continue to research now, that really impacts me, and sort of what I'm deeply interested in as well. The commitment to growth is another characteristic of a healthy, intimate relationship. Because ultimately what we're talking to here is, how do we cultivate a healthy, intimate relationship? How do we cultivate a healthy, intimate way of being with each other? So commitment to growth, commitment to the growth of ourselves, commitment to the growth of the union, commitment to the growth of the other person. But it's more commitment to the growth of each other and us as individuals. And that for me, that's a huge definition of love. And that links back to being deeply honest in the relationship. Honest with how we feel, honest with ourselves, honest with remaining true to our values and our purpose, our purposes and who we are. Because when we do that, like, we become extremely powerful sovereign beings. And also knowing that, you know, love doesn't equal compatibility. Or just because we fall in love with someone, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a good partner for us to be with long term. Remember, love is an emotional process. Compatibility is a logical process to some degree. But of course, you know, that compatibility ability, the process is logical, but it definitely engages elements of emotion, of course. So, for example, like we need to look at childhood wounding, like we need to look at what the ego does to feel safe and what we attract as adults into our intimate relationships in terms of what's familiar, because what's familiar is comfortable and safe. So we're going to, and this leads back into that attachment theory, we're going to attract into our lives the types of attachments or experience that we experienced as a child, or that we move through as a child into our adulthood because it's familiar and it's safe. It's not necessarily good for us. It's not necessarily compatible for us, and we call it love, and that's not necessarily the wisest thing to do either. So essentially, we've really explored a number of different facets, a number of different characteristics that allow us to say, hey, this is love. Hey, this is the experience of love. This is what love is. This is what love can do. This is what love can be. This is the embodiment of love. And we haven't so much defined love. I'm very wary of that. But we've definitely explored the various expressions of love, but also knowing that whatever love is, it's not enough. And what we mean by that is that there are so many variables and characteristics that contribute to love, that it makes a great deal of sense to just continue to work on ourselves, continue to be open to ourselves, knowing that we're not perfect, and that's okay. We don't need to be perfect. It's not about being perfection. It's about progression and understanding ourselves and connecting to ourselves and learning to be at peace with that and learning to learn, like learning to grow and learn through, the various stages of life and the various dispositions of life as well, and being really deeply connected to that. And that's beautiful. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Diana. So love. Feel it, embody it, study it, be it, express it, give it, receive it, with it, keep learning it. It's a beautiful thing. We live for love. We live for connection. We live for intimacy. We do as human beings. We live that. So as we evolve, like through our physiology and our hardware per se, and there's reasons why all of that has evolved the way it has. Our consciousness, our ability to be aware of so much of life is also rapidly transmuting, which is influencing the way we relate and connect to each other as well. So being deeply mindful about that is so important for our own growth. So I wish you farewell. I want to say thank you so much for being here. I deeply appreciate it, of course. Yes, we are Love, Lana, absolutely. Please note that I'll be soon going live from my business page, so Steps to Foundless Relational Alchemist, over the next few weeks, next couple of weeks. By the end of January, that will happen. This will still be live on here as well, but it will predominantly be coming, the source of it will be coming from the business page, so be sure to like and follow that, please. Please share this video if you resonate with it, if there's something there for you, and for someone else that you feel may benefit as well. Please ask any questions, write any comments, anything that serves you there. I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. Just tag my name in it. That'll be wonderful. And just many blessings on your journey. Like I said, continue to receive, continue to give, continue to embody, continue to be present. Just continue to learn and grow. And thank you. And thank you so much for being here. Many, many blessings on your day or evening, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you again very, very soon. Thank you so much.